Good morning to everyone watching live on Facebook and wherever you are watching the recording on YouTube. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Uh, you could be anytime, anywhere. That's the great thing about the internet, enabling us all to connect. This is our daily edition of My Empowered Political Life. It is Friday, the 28th of March in the year of our Lord 2025. Anno Domini. So here we go for the news of the day. And today we're going to talk about something that I think is personally really important. You may disagree, but I think it's a really important story, but it's not getting enough coverage here in North America, in the US and Canada, where most of my followers are. So President Erdogan is consolidating his control in Turkey even further. I think this is an important story for the spread of authoritarianism and the suppression of democracy around the world. So, some background you may know if you followed Turkish politics. I hate to say I have, but I have. That Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been the leader of Turkey for over a decade now. I mean, he's kind of gone back and forth between prime minister and president, but basically, he's been in charge for a long time in Turkey. The international community has accused him of being autocratic, and election observers have questioned whether the elections that keep him in power and his party in power are free and fair. There's a reason I use here the word autocratic instead of authoritarianism. Autocratic is sort of the in between democracy and authoritarianism. In an autocratic country, which Turkey appears to be right now, there are elections. You do vote. Your vote is actually counted. It's just that very often the people you wish you could vote for are not allowed to be on the ballot. So it's sort of an in between state from a functioning democracy to a true authoritarian state. Hungary would be another good example of an autocratic state. Poland nearly became autocratic, but they seem to have backed off. And then I would say full on authoritarianism, where you essentially have a dictator, are places like North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, stuff like that. But what has been undisputed, that there's still a dispute on where Turkey is on the spectrum from democracy to autocracy to authoritarianism. But it is undisputed that Erdogan has spent the last decade consolidating his personal power. There's President Erdogan, um, and as I said, he's been consolidating his power. He is also a very capable executive and seems to he runs Turkey with an iron fist, but he also runs the country mostly well. I know some Turks will disagree based on their inflation levels and everything, but Turkey is more prosperous than a lot of countries in that region. Now, in 2016, again, a little bit of background. It just helps set the stage here. You may or may not remember in 2016, the Turkish military attempted to overthrow Erdogan by force. The Turkish military had pledged, very much like our military, they do not pledge allegiance to a person, they pledge allegiance to their constitution. So the officers in the Turkish military thought it was their duty to attempt to overthrow Erdogan because he was taking over the country. So the military tried to do it by force, and it's what we would call a coup d'état, and it appeared to have the support of the people, but it was defeated within a few days. This happened back in 2016. I was following it very closely at the time. I have some Turkish friends. This is probably why I follow Turkish politics and all that stuff. But here you see, here's a tank of the Turkish military with civilians on top of it supporting them. So it was the military with support of the people, but it was the uprising was put down and defeated, and Erdogan retained power. Now, I'm not saying a coup d'état is a good thing. The military, it's not clear to me that whatever government they would have installed would have been any better than Erdogan's. But they did, the Turkish military, like I said, they take an oath to their constitution, not to a person. So that's why they felt the need to do this. At the time, a good friend of mine he's Turkish, he knows Turkish politics, he's involved in it, very close to it. His family's from there. He said the Ataturk is rolling in his grave. Now, if you know Turkish history, again, I hate to say I follow this stuff for fun, but so if you know Turkish history, you know what that means. If you have not followed Turkish history, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, he is the founding father of the modern Turkish Republic. Turkey had been a series of kingdoms, empires, dictatorships for centuries until the Ataturk, we call him the Ataturk, um, the Ataturk came along. He's kind of like their George Washington. So right after World War One, he came along and he thought, no, I love my country. I want my country to be a democracy where the people have the power. Now, you can dispute Ataturk's motives, and there are questions about other issues that I don't even want to raise on here that are a subject for a different video. But he is considered by most to be the founder of the modern Turkish Republic. He's basically like their George Washington. This is the most famous portrait I've seen of Mustafa Ataturk. And Turkey, since World War One, and really, indeed, post World War Two, has been one of the world's most important democracies. You don't tend to think of that. You tend to think of places like the U.S. and Great Britain and Japan, which finally became a democracy after World War II, and Germany became a democracy after World War II. Turkey has been one of the world's most important democracies, whether or not you realize it in the post World War II world. They have been incredibly influential in the world. Now, keep in mind, right now, Turkey is a key NATO ally. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I forget how many members we have now. I think I don't even want to say, it's definitely upwards of 25 with the addition of the Eastern European countries over the last 20 years. But Turkey is a key NATO ally. Turkey has the second largest military in NATO. I'll give you one guess who has the most powerful military in NATO. But Turkey has the second largest, second most powerful military in NATO. They are extremely capable from a military standpoint, which makes them, of course, a really important NATO ally for the United States and Canada. Turkey has helped in combating terrorist groups in Iraq, Syria, and Kurdistan. They have been a key ally, not just in NATO sanctioned operations, but in making sure that U.S. interests are protected in the Middle East by combating terrorist groups. They have been a huge help in combating ISIS, and they have, of course, had to combat the rebel forces in Kurdistan. And that again is a much more complicated issue. I have some sympathy for the rebel forces in Kurdistan. At the same time, some of those forces use very terrorist-like tactics. And so Turkey has been very involved in combating terrorist groups throughout the Middle East, and especially in Iraq, Syria, and Kurdistan. Turkish pilots have literally fought Russian pilots. So you may know that the Russians sent a number of fighter squadrons to Syria because the Russians wanted to defend their Assad, their Syrian ally. They wanted to defend the Syrian authoritarian government. And the United States, we engaged in aircraft combat operations in Syria. In fact, there are a number of U.S. veterans who I've spoken to who have been involved in that. But the United States pilots did not engage in direct combat with the Russians. The Turkish did. The Turks were the ally who were willing to take on direct combat with Russian pilots in Syria. And the Turks came out, as far as I can tell, they came out victorious in every encounter. So again, Turkey is a really important ally. They are very, very important to the United States and protecting United States interests, even to the point of the Turkish pilots being the ones who are willing to take on direct dogfights with Russian pilots. So what's happening right now? Let's talk about the city of Istanbul. The city is Istanbul has a population of about 16 million people. It's either it's definitely the largest city in Turkey by far. It is the only metropolitan city that is in both Europe and Asia because it expands across the Bosphorus. And it's certainly one of the largest cities in Europe. So Istanbul as a city is a really important place in Europe and Asia. Istanbul has a very popular mayor. His name is Ekrem İmamoğlu. There he is. And he is considered to be the main threat to unseating Erdogan in the next presidential election. It looks like he was going to run for president in Turkey. Very popular. He's very popular in Turkey's largest city, which means he stood a good chance of actually winning the election. Now, here's the problem. Erdogan couldn't have that. So he had Imamoglu arrested. And then protests broke out in both Istanbul and Ankara, the capital. So Turkey's two largest cities are filled with protests right now. There are protests in other cities as well, but Istanbul and Ankara encompass basically most of Turkey's population and citizenry. So there are massive protests breaking out. You can see here, this is a picture from a couple days ago. Um, just, people raising their Turkish flags, marking in the streets. And at least 1,400 people have been jailed as a result of the protests. As far as I can tell, the protests are peaceful. Obviously, I could be wrong. The news out of Turkey is difficult to find right now. As I said, it's not being covered that well in North America, where most of my clients are. And because Turkey is a bit of an autocracy, it's hard to get news out of there right now. But apparently, at least 1,400 of these protesters have been jailed, despite them protesting peacefully, as far as I can tell. I could be wrong. Some of them might have gotten violent. Again, there's a lot we don't know. This is all happening now. This is very current. It's happening right now. Um, and we'll see how many more. And I say at least 1,400 because, again, the exact number is up in the air. Nobody knows. It's not like President Erdogan just releases the exact number of protesters who have been jailed or why. So we don't know. So let's get into doors and corners where we look behind the doors and we look around the corners, just like a good police detective entering a dangerous situation. So we can see what's coming. What are the implications here? There is a lot of wide speculation that the arrest of Istanbul's mayor İmamoğlu was based on trumped up charges. It's really hard to know this for sure. Erdogan says that İmamoğlu is corrupt, and I can't say he wasn't corrupt. I mean, he's the mayor of one of the largest, most important cities in Europe. I would not be shocked if there was some corruption involved, but it's not at all clear that the charges are real or fact-based, or even that they are related to the underlying the underlying motivations. Let's just see. It appears because of the timing that the underlying motivation was to remove İmamoğlu from the ballot so he could not challenge Erdogan. But as I say, is İmamoğlu corrupt? I can't say he is or isn't. I simply don't know enough. Neither do any of us. What we do know is that Erdogan sees İmamoğlu as the only real threat to his power in having control of Turkey. That's what we do know from this. So as I said, the charges, I don't know how fact-based they are. There's no real way to know because it's a secretive system. But we do know the timing makes it seem like İmamoğlu was arrested because he's a threat to win the presidency in an election. And what we are seeing in Turkey is that people are pissed off, just like they were pissed off in 2016, 9 years ago. They are pissed off now, and they are rising up and risking jail. Here's the difference. In 2016, it was the military that led the charge to unseat Erdogan. Now the military is sitting it out. Now, in large part, that's because after the 2016 coup d'etat attempt, Erdogan purged the military leadership. So many of the leaders who were loyal to the Turkish constitution are now gone. And now most of the military leaders are loyal to Erdogan. And so the military we are seeing now is not rising up, but the people are, the citizens of Turkey are rising up. And their bravery in risking jail time, as we've seen, at least 1,400. I will say pure speculation. This is pure speculation on my part that is a very low number, that many more have been jailed. But again, it's speculation. We don't know that. But the people are rising up and showing incredible bravery and risking jail time. And so if you ever wondered what an authoritarian takeover looks like, this is what it looks like. This is exactly what it looks like. So watch these signs, remember these signs, and watch for them again. Perhaps someplace where you live. And in a matter of international security, this consolidation by Erdogan is really destabilizing for NATO. as I said, um, so NATO, it's often said, and it's absolutely true. NATO is the most powerful military alliance in the history of the world. It just is. And the United States has the largest military in that alliance, and Turkey has the second largest, and they're second by a little bit. It's not like they're way down the list. Turkey has a large, powerful, capable, well-trained military. So Turkey is a really important NATO ally. So a full-on authoritarian consolidation in Turkey, where Erdogan goes from autocrat to authoritarian to dictator, is destabilizing for NATO because NATO is mostly based on democratic principles and democratic values. So it's very destabilizing for NATO, and it's destabilizing for negotiations with Russia and Ukraine. If you know your geography, you know that Turkey controls the entrance to the Black Sea. Turkey controls the Bosphorus Strait. They control who goes in and out. Nobody gets in or out of the Black Sea without Turkey's permission. Period. Stop. End of story. So this is troubling because the Black Sea is obviously very important geographically in the conflict with Russia and Ukraine right now. And Turkey controls the entrance and exit to the Black Sea. So this is destabilizing with the whole situation. As I like to say sometimes, it's not great. It's just genuinely not great. So that's our story for today. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you learned something that you're not seeing in the mainstream news, which is one of my goals. Again, if you love what we're doing, if you like what we're doing, if you want more people to see it, then all you have to do is like and subscribe. If you click that like button, what do people like to say? Smash that button, right? Smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, smash the bell. That helps get out these stories to more people. Thanks so much, everyone. I will see you soon.